Welcome one and welcome all. Tonight we're live on BerryFlow Upstream, number 113. I kind of hate that I have to say this, but the title of today's episode is BBM Baby. I'm here with Alex Bass of Cyberbytes Inc., Blaze, editor-in-chief over at BlackBerry. How you both doing today?
Really well. Good. Just been relaxing.
Been an alright weekend. I like weekends.
Yeah.
Except today, Monday's coming, and I hate Mondays.
Come
Mondays
on.
are terrible.
Yeah.
Fun.
I took a 3-day weekend myself just to kind of catch up on a certain game that we don't mention anymore. But, definitely been an interesting week here. I've been jamming out to a new tune, guys. It's this leaked demo track written and produced by Lana Del Ray back in 2011, which I think is really important to all of this news, right? 2011 was kind of like a better time for BlackBerry in terms of like the social presence that they had. The fact that Lana Del Ray had a song that is, I might play it here in a little bit, just a little portion of it, but I don't want to get any copyright errors or anything like that. But the song itself it's really BBM kind of related. If you check out the lyrics and things like that, what do you guys think the impact of this type of leaked song has in terms of BBM's perception anywhere? I mean, does it even? I mean, it's kind of weird that the post even shows up in the news feed, let alone on BlackBerry. Like, Blaze, what significance did you find here to go ahead and post it?
Well, I mean, it just basically, like you said, even though it comes from like 2011, it still shows that there's interest out there. Like, there's been people that have been essentially waiting for this track to leak out, and whether or not that speaks anything towards BBM, I doubt it. But it's more towards like Lana Del Ray's following. But at the same time, it just goes to show you there's still social influence across BBM and everything like that. Like, I don't know if BBM is essentially the highlight of the track leaking itself for the majority of people, but it's still something for us BlackBerry users to go ahead and appreciate as well, right? Like, oh, she's totally talking about BBM in this song. So I don't know. It's one of those things where it comes across as somewhat newsworthy. I mean, it's not exciting news. Like, I don't wake up in the morning and hope that a Lana Del Ray track about BBM leaks every single day, but it's still interesting to see that comes out. And at that point in time, just because of the fact that it has BBM even in the title and they're talking about it, it creates conversation about BlackBerry and BBM. Although it's debatable whether or not that's negative attention or positive attention in this case, because I mean, look at the lyrics. It's totally about sexting on BBM. So
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting point, though. I find that it's not something, and you mentioned this in your little write-up for the track, and I thought it was very kind of on the nose, is that this isn't the first time, and it won't be the last time that we hear any kind of BlackBerry-related reference in music, and we see that throughout, and it kind of goes to show BlackBerry's social influence both then and now. The fact that there is still, it is still a catalyst in the news in terms of pushing the name BBM out there. BBM is still used by hundreds of millions, so keeping that all in mind, I think it's a very interesting kind of piece to come out, and that the fact that, as Blaze mentioned earlier too, like a lot of the fan base that Lana Del Ray has have been waiting for these tracks to leak, and slowly but surely, years later, the music comes out, and this is one of those other songs. So, kind of interesting, nonetheless. What do you guys think of, Alex, I wanted to hear something like your input on this. Do you think any of this has like any social justice for BBM? Like, does it bring it forward in any way in the eyes of any, or is it just another thing that kind of shouldn't have happened?
No, it's one of those things I don't think really it matters too much, but that's also because part of me is pumped for Aloe possibly coming out tomorrow. So we'll see. I don't think it really changes anyone's mind about like using BBM, like this unreleased song, or like I don't know. It's funny, it's interesting, but I think that's, to me at least, that's all it is.
Here's the transition point in the conversation, right? It's if we look at BBM and that conversation, and you're bringing up Aloe and things like that, I find it kind of odd that BBM isn't going out there and doing a little bit more in terms of trying to bring up the awareness around what BBM is. I say that while I look at BBM's Twitter, and if you take a look at it yourself, you're going to see that they've basically gone on a gauntlet of creating these images that represent individual features that the app has, be it, private chats, be it timed messages, retraction. And if you look at the media assets that they're producing,
Hmm.
a lot of the people that you see inside of these graphics are clearly kind of tailored toward the demographic that BBM is most strong in, that Asia Pacific region, etc. So it's very, very interesting to see the strategy really start to change. We see this BBM Discovery tab. We see the way they're marketing BBM. We see obviously things like the BBM Channel, desktop web admin back panel edition with that new invite for, live posts. It gets kind of interesting when they're really kind of doubling down on how they're going to go about making money off of BBM. And I think a song like this right now when it does is definitely interesting nonetheless, because while this song may have not seen the light of day for a while, we really don't know what the path forward is for BBM and where they're going to take it. Do you guys still find yourself using BBM on a pretty daily basis even, or is it maybe every other day? I find myself slowly and slowly and slowly using it a little bit less and less, mainly because again the
Yeah.
contacts aren't necessarily all there. But what are you guys' experience? Because I still check in, but more as a
Hmm.
a habitual thing.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I've actually been using SMS on like it sucks because a bunch of my friends are on iPhones, so I'm using SMS a lot, so like Textra, and then I'm also using WhatsApp more and more simply because it's like I'll kind of bug one of my friends who I'm texting, like my friend, like she was in Canada yesterday, and I sent her a couple text messages, and she mentioned she was in Canada. I was like, oh shoot, like this is not a good idea then, and I was like, man, I wish you had like WhatsApp or something. And she's like, oh, I do have WhatsApp. So then now I WhatsApp her. So it's kind of like this weird little thing where it's tough to be like I doubt she would ever be like, oh yeah, I have BBM installed on her iPhone. But like WhatsApp, there's a higher chance of it happening. So it's really just this core group, like you guys I talked to on BBM, my family. So we have like a family group chat. When we let the dogs out, feed them, whatever, we kind of message in the chat like, hey, just let the dogs out or just fed them. But it's very like specific things that it's like, okay, I want to talk to this person, so I know I use BBM for them, I use WhatsApp for them, I use SMS for them, and it is kind of, confusing. And sometimes I'll like text message the person I should have BBM'd, and like I don't know.
Yeah, that happens a lot with my buddy who's on a Z30. He'll text me sometimes and then BBM me some other times, and it gets
Yeah.
really I'm like, dude, why?
Yeah.
Boys, what's your experience with BBM? Are you using other services like Slack or WhatsApp or even Facebook Messenger? And in turn, does the hub help you kind of aggregate any of that if you are?
Yeah, actually, I mean, we use Slack all the time, basically for work purposes and stuff like that. But when it comes down to my personal use, I still use BBM and oddly enough, Facebook Messenger as well because for some reason my kid likes to use Facebook Messenger more so than anything else. If he's not placing video calls, then he's just sending me messages through Facebook. I guess it's mainly because it's like one of the main services that we essentially allow him to go ahead and use because we can keep track of it. Like him and his mother both have his logins and stuff like that. So I guess that's one reason as to why. But I have maintain all of my groups and stuff like that on BBM, but I don't necessarily interact with the groups as much as what I once did. And I
Of
don't.
course not, because BlackBerry or BBM rather hid it in God knows where on that side menu.
That's a good point because I was gonna say like I don't necessarily know why I don't interact with the groups anymore, whether or not it's just a personal thing or a time thing or what. But maybe it is because of the fact that they hid it and buried it now. Didn't actually give much thought about it. But yeah, I do certainly find that I don't use groups as much. One-to-one conversations, I still tend to use those quite a bit. But when it comes to like using groups, I definitely am self-aware of the fact that I don't use groups as much as I once did, even though those groups are still maintained by the people who are in there. It's just I'm more likely to go ahead and have a one-on-one conversation with the individuals that are in those groups rather than actually just conversing within the group itself. Which I don't know. Like you said, maybe that is the reason as to why I don't do it as much anymore. They kind of buried it with the last update.
BBM is one of those weird things, man. I mean, I really like that they're adding that buy now feature. I think that's smart. In my little write up for this for this podcast. I was like, finally, this is something we should have had a while ago, let alone like finally bringing it around now. One of the things is I feel like it's 3 years later and we're starting to get things we asked for forever ago, Like we're starting to get BBM video right now. Maybe we can get it cross-platform with BB10 included, right? That'd be nice. But we're starting to see like BlackBerry kind of look back and hear that user feedback echo, and a lot of that's coming forward. And I think that's an important thing for the community to be vocal still, because input now, especially through this transition to Android, it's going to be so important that one, it's heard, and that one, they're using it. I want to give a quick shout out to BlackBerry kind of for that reason, at least on the social side, reposting one of the photos that we've posted on our Instagram. I think that kind of fan service is really smart for them to continue to do, where they're reaching out to the base of users that already support them and then use that to help sell your message. I think that's so wise. And the BlackBerry of old probably would have, well, the BlackBerry of old didn't even have an Instagram, right? Get that like laid out first, let alone use it effectively as a way to connect with people. I see them in the comments, talking like, hey, visit Shop BlackBerry, go check out this deal. This phone may be best for you. Like that kind of social engagement, super positive. So I'm glad BlackBerry's doing it. I'm glad they got their domain name. I know we've talked about that before in terms of like BlackBerry Studio on Instagram and then getting the actual handle for it. Some really just interesting stuff going on overall. But I'm thinking if BlackBerry were to go ahead and do something with BBM, right? This messaging platform is pretty good. It has timed messages. It has PayPal integration, Glimpse, the fact that you do have groups, channels, and all these other aspects. I'm kind of miffed as to why BBM isn't doing better in the marketplace. Do you think like there's anything that they could do to kind of bring it full circle back in the United States, or are SMS, iMessage, and maybe soon to be Allo kind of eating all that space so that there's no room for BlackBerry, and that them moving their focus to a market like Indonesia or the Western Hemisphere is just a better move for them overall? Like, what do you guys really think? Is there momentum enough for BlackBerry to be in the U.S. market with BBM?
No. They basically need to take the application, rename it something else that doesn't follow BBM or BlackBerry, and release it as some sort of application that was created in like Indonesia or something like that. As terrible as that sounds, that's how they could essentially go ahead and get momentum with it. Give it a little bit of a UI change. Drop BBM, the actual name. Drop BlackBerry from the creator of the application and submit it to, the Google Play Store and the iTunes Store, and there you go. That's how you would help essentially BBM take off, by not calling it BBM.
Right.
It's such a bad, just people don't want to use BlackBerry products at certain points, and like that's it. It's unfortunate, but there's still sentiment across some of the user base where they just don't want to use anything that is labeled BlackBerry.
What if BlackBerry did another name change? Like, no, like I'm dead serious. Like once they get their whole ecosystem and they're more in the IoT space and the hardware is, whatever. What if they did another name change and BlackBerry became like maybe an umbrella, such as Research in Motion was to a degree, right? It'd be kind of interesting that, imagine a structure organizationally where BBM is part of BlackBerry. And it's not that hard because it kind of already is, right?
Yep.
Imagine more standalone business units kind of, but with their own. And that kind of cultivation in terms of like a startup culture that they could have there could be really, really beneficial for them. In our live chat right now, which you can check out on YouTube for the stream, is Lewis Cross actually says, I use a lot of SMS still. Having SMS integration in BBM would be perfect, and that may be another additive to maybe a rebranding or restructuring that would be beneficial. What about you, Alex? I mean, you're kind of all over the place. Do you?
Yeah. Well, so it's kind of interesting. So
I hate to interrupt, Alex, but I want to let everyone know, just to give you context here, Alex uses 3 different web browsers for different specific tasks. So when he tells you something, it's probably the most efficient way you can go about it. So, Alex, tell us your setup right now.
So, well, I mean, there's a couple of things that you guys were talking about that I kind of wanted to bring up. So,
Alex's computer crashed, I think.
I think so. He lagged out hard there for a while.
All that pent up energy about what he was about to say just took his computer out.
The sad thing is that it was probably really great and informative, and now he missed his moment. Nobody's gonna care anymore.
They'll come back like guns blazing, no doubt. But Sean mentions here on our live chat as well that it's all about perception, James. The name BlackBerry and BBM screams old
Yep.
to non-users, and I think that's a really important thing. Again, but could you not address that qualm with a little bit more marketing? You know, just like BlackBerry isn't dead. Can you redefine a brand at this late in the game? Like, I mean, that's kind of the point I'm waiting to see. Like, is BlackBerry ever going to go back and try to bring everything full circle for BlackBerry itself, or are they going to make the balance sheet look pretty and kind of dip out? I know Toronto Star did an article talking about how, you know, BlackBerry doing better speaks more loudly to a potential buyout in the future. And we've seen what John Chen did with Sybase, right? So no need to swing back there, but you guys can understand that when things look good for a company in rebound, absorption becomes kind of like the market play next, right? Do you think BlackBerry is really just gearing up for something like that, like an exit in the market entirely in terms of, you know, being a standalone company, or do they want to fold into another big player and really
No,
be a value add?
I don't think they're gearing up for it, but I mean, John Chen has made no bones about it. If somebody comes to him with the right amount of zeros on the end of a check, he's ready to let it go. You know, he's basically he stated he has his fiduciary responsibility to go ahead and listen to any offer. So I don't think that it's something that they have set in motion. Like they're not, you know, trying to go ahead and reach a certain point where the financial stability in the organization is, you know, a portion of them being able to go ahead and say, look, we made this much money, buy us now. I think it's more along the lines of we're going to keep doing what we're doing to go ahead and get it right and get everything, you know, all the ducks in a row and get everything set up the way that we want it to be set up. And if somebody happens to come along who is willing to go ahead and write that many zeros on a check, then, you know, that's when they'll look at those opportunities. But I don't think they set out to be able to go ahead and be bought out. Like, you know.
But yeah, when the numbers, you know, when the money hits the table, it's a different piece.
Yeah,
Alex, you were
exactly.
geared up,
Yeah,
man.
I was so ready. My computer
Yeah,
just
you were
crashed
geared up.
randomly. But yeah, so one of the main things I was going to bring up is if you look at something like Snapchat and how big it is in the US, like literally every single person you know probably has it or has used it at one point in time. But then you look at a country, you look at other countries, and specifically like China, there's a competitor that recently came out called Snow, and it's just taken storm over there, and there's no Snapchat. So it really doesn't matter how big, say, BBM is in maybe India or other segments. That means absolutely nothing to the US. And a picture that I always want to come back to is this picture here, and that is essentially like it's showing that Facebook Messenger like destroys in the US, and then WhatsApp is pretty much everywhere else. So like that is the reason why WhatsApp was purchased by Facebook, because essentially it covered everywhere that Facebook didn't cover. So I think it's so difficult to be like, is BBM ever going to come back, or is there some way that we can get it to come back? And like if it's big in this area, can it come back to the US? I think it's dead in the US. Like, and when I say dead, I just mean like you can have 100 million users in the US and still consider dead. Like this is kind of the point that we're at. So do I realistically see BBM getting to a point, or something that BlackBerry can do to get to a point? I don't think so. And then the only thing, like I have some hope for Allo, but it's really like a 20% hope that it'll be successful, and that's because they have 1.6 billion users on Android, and if they could some way make it come default on the phone, which you might have some problems with, like Monopoly. Like you can't always just choose, hey, here's our new service, we're going to have it come default on the phone, because now you're in Monopoly territory. It's supposed to be an open source ecosystem, so you can't go forcing your apps on people. That's dangerous. So I don't really know what's going to happen with that, but do I think BBM is going to be the one that's successful, or a brand new app like Allo? I think Allo has a better chance. That doesn't mean that BBM isn't useful in other market segments. It doesn't need to be successful in the US, and that's fine. And that's where I'm kind of torn by all of it. It's too late at this point in time. And I love
For the
BBM.
U.S. market.
Yes, for the US market, yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I love BBM too, man. Like, I think it's a really good messenger. Like, I haven't really found a need to move a lot of my conversations elsewhere, or at least my more, you know, engaging and dynamic conversations elsewhere, because it does what I need it to, right? In terms of, I've gotten most of my family on it. You know, everyone knows how to work it and all that stuff, and it seems to integrate well. If perception is the problem, and that's what we're hearing a lot about in our chat today, if perception's the problem, like, what do you do to change it, right? Perception begins in people, right? You got to go out to people and make sure what they think, the important people, what they think is changed, right? Because if the fundamental problem with BlackBerry is that, you know, perception is reality and people don't believe that BlackBerry is here or doing anything worth their time, then there's no hope whatsoever. But if BlackBerry can do any kind of campaign or any kind of even business outreach, you know, the way they work together and try to create partnerships. I mean, we hear at their conferences and their web events and things like that that we work better together, right? The last security conference sponsored by Windows and Samsung, like, if that's truly what you're about nowadays, I think aside from the enterprise and in, you know, general markets that you serve, the same customers that you've been serving for the last, you know, X amount of years, or that same industry that you've been serving for X amount of years, how do you have and start a conversation that's sustaining to be able to address the larger part of the market, right? That's what Android is for your mobile play, right? Addressing that larger market. Your marketing and everything else about you needs to be able to match that. Otherwise, you're going to have an inconsistent platform to truly deliver your products, you know? And if BlackBerry can't get that on their own, that they need to go down to the person and actually change the perception of the individuals in a dramatic way, then it's almost as if they're apathetic to their own problem at this point. And can just kind of driving down the hard line toward this enterprise, you know, core platform going to be enough to really sustain this business long term? I wonder, like, we get what's happening now, things like lawsuits, right? BlackBerry has 44,000 patents at least, right? And they're just now starting to defend some of them. It creates an interesting conversation for the business strategy BlackBerry is going at right now versus the one they're capable of scaling up into in the years to come. We hear a little bit about BlackBerry Radar, this asset tracking stuff. What do you guys think, like, about lawsuits specifically? This is like the second lawsuit in the same week, basically. Like, this one against Blue filed over here in Florida, and BlackBerry does have a headquarters here in Florida, which is also kind of interesting over there in Sunrise. But what do you guys think? Do these types of lawsuits, is it more pride or is it more money at this point? You know?
Well, I mean, they basically have to go ahead and defend their patents. They don't really have too much way around it. Like, you have to go ahead and defend those patents legally. You're required to defend them, and you know, I don't really see any problem with it. Is there probably some financial profitability attached to that? Of course. I mean, that's how that's how the system is designed, to be able to go ahead and basically go after these people who are essentially using your patents. If they can't agree to terms, to patent usage terms ahead of time, then you obviously have to go ahead and take care of them within the court system. And not everybody is so willing to go ahead and make those agreements ahead of time, right? I guess it really comes down to the basic question is whether or not BlackBerry's trolling everybody with their patents, and I don't necessarily believe that's the case. BlackBerry isn't out there necessarily to be a patent troll. They're just basically going ahead and collecting what people have gone ahead and used and abused for a long period of time anyways, accordingly to the documentation. I mean, it still comes down to the courts to be able to go ahead and decide whether or not that is the legality of it all. But BlackBerry believes that to be the case, and they have gone ahead and submitted these you know, proposals to people, and whether or not, especially in the case of Blue Products, where Blue Products didn't even respond back to any of their arguments, then, you know, what else do you do at that point in time? You have to follow through with the litigation process. I mean, it'd be like if James stole $5,000 from me or whatever. What am I going to do, right? I'm going to ask James for the money back, and, you know, maybe we can make some sort of arrangement to get that money back, and I don't call the cops on him. But if, you know, we can't come to that, then obviously I'm going to go ahead and call the cops, and I'm going to get my money back. That's just the way the world works, right?
Why are you airing our business out there, Blue?
No, I think patents are kind of an interesting thing, and I'm curious, like, I don't know if all the audience knows, I'm sure you guys know, but I guess like FaceTime with Apple was actually planning on being totally open source cross-platform.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's not is because they infringed on a patent. So every single user that installs FaceTime, Apple has to pay some royalty out. So great for getting people on iOS and using FaceTime, but for them to open it up to Android, like that is that's a shitload of money that they'd have to pay out. Say that all of a
Yeah.
sudden they got 500 million people to sign up on FaceTime. That's a lot of money they have to go and pay out. And they're like, is that worth it? Well, on iOS, it's worth it because you're getting someone on your ecosystem and they buy a phone, it kind of pays for itself. It's in the cost of the product. And then it just shows like where patents are really problematic when it comes to even innovation. So look at iMessage, and they have this way that your phone number is tied in. So essentially, as long as you have someone's phone number, and if they have iMessage, it does a check on their server and says, this person is iMessage, I'm going to send the message instead of an SMS and send it as an iMessage. Well, apparently from people I've heard talking about it, they said that that is actually patented by Apple. So say if Google or BlackBerry or someone wanted to make an iMessage equivalent, they can't do it in a way where you send the message, it checks the server, should I send this as SMS or regular? So that's why like back in the day, Hangouts, you would have a user and you can choose send this as a Hangout message or send as an SMS, but the user chooses it. So it's frustrating because like these patents are really screwing people over, but it's also like I'm so torn on it because like it's always when you're fighting for it, I want like for the consumer, the end user, patents are kind of a bad thing, but for the company, like you should be protected for what you do. But then there's also patent trolls, and it really is a difficult.
Well, I mean, what it comes down to is that the whole patent system needs to be revamped. I mean,
Yes.
I at this point in time, I can say that BlackBerry isn't necessarily being a patent troll, but at the same time, I have to be able to say that like the whole patent system needs to be rehauled anyways
The
because
patent
it's
system is the troll, you know?
yeah, exactly. Like it creates the ability for these people and organizations to go out there and basically attack anybody with very vague statements. Like you can go ahead and you can file a patent, and that patent doesn't necessarily have to be the broadest in terms. You could basically just pick the vaguest statement humanly possible and submit it as a patent and then start trolling people with it, right?
Hmm.
But I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, I think that's the real problem is that the patent system needs to be overhauled in totality in order for it to start making sense. But where do you even begin with that? I mean, that's a
I
whole other.
I have a question for you about that because like patents in say like biotech. So essentially there is like someone they put in all the R&D which is so damn expensive to get like a new drug, and I think they have a patent for like 15 years, but after those 15 years then you start seeing all the general ones pop up. So like there is Advil, but now there's like, you know, Topps brand and a bunch of other brands that are cheaper. Is it is it different in technology? Because you, from what I understand, you can keep changing the patent a little bit, like every 5 years or however many years, and you keep it. But in the medical industry, isn't it a little bit different, or is it the same thing?
I don't necessarily know, but
It's yeah, it's gonna be different because one is like they're gonna be the chemical, you know,
Makeup of
build
it, or
of
yeah, okay,
whatever medicine. So
yeah,
that, you know, it's almost like I've learned your blueprint and I can of
yeah.
course just replicate it. Even if you change it, you know, unless you're adding new things, then I'll have to wait for
The
those to roll
process of
out. Where
making
with
it can be
with
patented.
technology, a
Okay.
lot of these technology patents are per use. So like if
Hmm.
you look at the FRAND terms and what BlackBerry basically offered them up, they were like, "Yo, we're going to give this to you as like an essential standard patent, you know? Like this is a standard usage one that we issue to everybody who wants to use these." They didn't go like and try to set up their own, higher price or anything like that. They sent it under general use terms basically. And with as Blaze mentioned earlier, since Blue just didn't even respond, of course they had to go forward with litigation. On the kind of broader sense of these patents, Alex, do you think that with 44,000 patents, they're just trying to like make some money off of them? I mean, we got to look at BlackBerry's situation as well. If there is this kind of bank or rather vault full of potential assets that are there's articles that suggest
Yeah.
that the IP store is almost as valuable as the company itself and
yeah.
operational. So, I mean, if they're not making money from it, what's the point almost?
No, I think even for general perception, like I mean, if any of you, if any of the people listening, like if you haven't heard of like the Google Oracle lawsuit. Like this is like one of the biggest lawsuits that like ever happened, and it's still going on like 10 years later. It's ridiculous. But people in their mind, like they're like, okay, so Google and Oracle are still around, right? So if there are a bunch of lawsuits popping up and it's like, oh wow, like BlackBerry has a patent for this, like this cool thing that now this company is doing or whatever, I think it makes BlackBerry relevant in a weird way. So even if they are trolling in some way, I feel like at least it makes people realize, oh, BlackBerries are on, I didn't even know they were on, and B, like maybe they are a little bit bigger than I was thinking. And as bad as it might be, I think it's also not bad for perception, really. Some people might look at it bad, like patent trolls, but
let's all give a clap for Zipperstein, who's just killing it over there at BlackBerry. Have we seen them lose? The question, like they don't get into anything that they're gonna lose, you know. It seems
well,
that
they
this
lost the BBX one.
oh boy.
That was pre-Zipperstein. Thank you.
The interesting thing is that I went through some of those patents. Now, I'm obviously no patent lawyer. I don't really fully understand the entirety of the patent system or anything like that. However, when I went through some of the patents that they were basically claiming against Blue, I noticed that a lot of them seemed to be more in line with like Android than anything else. Like they were basically using Blue's Android devices to say like, okay, this notification system that this drop down in the notification system that you're using, you can't use that because we patented it. But it looked to me and my non-legal eyes as though it was just the Android notification system. I'm like, so wait a minute, if they're claiming a patent on these guys, does that mean that they're essentially going to go ahead and claim some patents on some others that may possibly be in the Android ecosystem as well? Because I mean, if you start with Blue and you end up at like Sony and Samsung and everything else, then that's kind of crazy. That's getting into like trollish territory. But I don't know, man. It was kind of interesting. Like I said, a lot of them seemed like they were more related to Android and how Android looks versus anything else that Blue was doing in terms of, you know, laying out their devices or using anything internally that would be against BlackBerry's patent. It's all very interesting to me.
If you look at the kind of serviceable market that Blue was going into as well, it's even more interesting because it seems like they're obviously charging for damages, substantial revenue gained while using, blah, you know, that kind of syntax there. But if we look at kind of where Blue was, it's in a lot of these markets that BlackBerry used to kind of command, you know, a lot of these cheaper demographics that BlackBerry's going after. So it's just really interesting to see. Maybe it's more of a regional kind of attack on here as well. I'm still interested in seeing like how these Amazon phones work. Those Amazon Prime phones that you buy and have that Amazon ad on the front of the lock screen and stuff like that, and you get prompted as such. And then you can get them pretty cheap, right? Decent phones for like $49.99. I mean, that takes a DTEK50 and makes it look like, you know, a super premium type of device. Now, when we talk about like the DTEK50, Blaze, are you still using yours?
Yep.
You know, it really has grown on me more so than I thought it would.
Told you, man.
Like, I still like the heft and the battery of the Priv, but there's just something that's so like basic about it, and it feels like I'm holding a Z. Maybe it's just my mind, like I'm just selling myself into the fact that it's a Z30, but it's really not. But this is basically like a Z50 would be, you know, in terms of the build, in terms of everything else. Like, aside from the disappointment on kind of which OS is running, I'm quite pleased with it, you know?
Man, I don't care what anybody says. It's actually a nice device. Like, I actually enjoy using it. Like, I'm like I said last podcast, like, I'm not saying it's the best device out there. Nobody in their right mind would say that. However, I'm saying that you can pick this device up and you can use it. You can use it for several days and not really have any complaints about it. It's just a good all-around device.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, if you're being super duper picky, I mean, if we gave this thing to Alex would be like, well, this is wrong with it. This is wrong with it. This is
You
wrong with it.
know,
I don't
I,
like
I
this. I
even
don't
think
like this.
Alex would probably like grow to appreciate the pros more than the cons. And in my
Maybe.
period with the review that I've been working on for some time now, it's really kind of coming to that point for me where, as Blaze said, it's a pretty good phone, and it almost makes you realize how also like maybe not mind blowing the Priv is. You know, I guess that's a weird thing to say, but the additive of the like the software keyboard on Android is nice. You get a lot of extra layers, but at the same point, you get a keyboard, and it's not even probably one of BlackBerry's best keyboards in terms of like the classic and the passport and some of the older keyboard styles that we've seen. Just kind of an interesting correlation to make there. What's weird is just the weird, and I know we talked about this last podcast, so I hate to bring it back up, but just the weird differences between the OSs. Because I'm using both these phones in tandem, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is not the same. Like, it's different. For instance, on DTEK50, there's no picture password, right? And I don't know if that's a hardware thing. Like, I have no idea, to be quite honest. Maybe they can't tie that type of software into the boot chain that they've built, or whatever. But on DTEK50, there is an ability to lock your device, or basically when you restart your device, it'll ask for your PIN code so that your device won't even turn on into its restart or reboot without that secure code. And then you have to enter that code again when you hit the lock screen. So just like a double layer of security on off, where Priv doesn't offer that. And it's like there's so many weird little things like that
You
on
know,
these phones.
there's something interesting with that though that I noticed. If you enable Android Pay on your phone, it doesn't let you use picture password. You have to, like, even using a pattern unlock, which is less secure than picture password. But I found that kind of strange. So then, like, a lot of my friends and family, they use picture password. Um, but oh, for instance, Google Apps for Work. If you set up your phone with that and you turn on two-factor authentication, they don't let you use uh, unlock the BlackBerry pattern unlock. You have, or the BlackBerry picture unlock. You have to use the pattern or pin or like whatever. So maybe it's something so deep rooted within Android that it's like in order to enable like two-factor authentication, security for like Google accounts and certain things like that within enterprise. Maybe BlackBerry, it was too much work to get the clearance on that for that to work. So like a lot of my family and friends have been disabling it, not because they want to and they miss it, simply because for them to have the two-factor auth on the phone using, it's kind of tough to explain, but like when you go to log in with Google right now through Google Apps for Work, so your work account, you can have it so Google sends you a prompt where you just click no or yes, and that's like the two-factor auth, and it's a lot easier. But the only way to have that working on your phone, you can't use BlackBerry's pad or a picture password. So I'm assuming it's probably due to something like that.
I just feel bad for Darius, man. But did you guys catch what's going on with him in the chat, dude? Oh my gosh,
Yes.
terrible. So, for just for housekeeping here, Brandon is actually in Budapest right now. He's traveling, gonna go
Of
visit some
course he
family.
is.
He's always over. He's headed towards Spain, I believe, but he's over in Budapest right now, just kind of enjoying himself and rubbing bellies with statues. You know, normal Brandon type stuff. DJ
Wonder how
BMO,
long
guys.
it'll take
DJ
before he gets arrested.
BMO. Public intoxication or whatever. It's so that's a little bit of housekeeping on Brandon's side of the house, right? But on with Darius, Darius is working, and he I guess took his phone internationally and is getting like NEP locked or something. Basically, his phone was unlocked, but then like ununlocked while he was abroad, and now it's just totally locked to the carrier, and he can't get it unlocked to work internationally for him. So he's having some serious troubles there. So if anyone has any contacts, you know, up there with the BlackBerry Elite tech support team, let us know if you know how to get around one of those, and we'll try to get you connected with Darius, because that must suck. That must be super frustrating. He had to pick up a beater, like a Samsung J1 smartphone, and I was like, oh, did you see the DTEK50 over there? And he's like, no.
So what's he using, or what was he using? He's using a Priv?
Yeah, I was using an AT&T Priv, and basically the
Uh,
carrier backend basically didn't registered his unlock for like several hours. He was able to travel, use it, turn the phone off, turn the phone on, boom, it's locked out again. So he's having some troubles getting it back. He's been on the phone with the carrier, with BlackBerry. They're both pointing fingers at one another. Just a mess. But I'm sure he'll get some kind of a ratification there soon. He just gotta keep knocking on the right doors. That kind of sucks though, especially if you need it for work and stuff. I know that's frustrating.
Yeah.
I thought Blaze was gonna be like, "Let me find the answer for you."
No, I wish I could. The
Right?
unfortunate,
I
the
knowledge base.
unfortunate thing is that I would just instantly blame AT&T. As soon as you said it was an AT&T proof, I'm like, that's AT&T's problem. Can't blame
That's kind of how
BlackBerry
I
for that
feel
one,
too.
right?
Yeah, I
I
feel like
mean,
honestly, it's probably the SIM. Like, just unlock the device. Maybe there's just a period
you
it
know
takes.
AT&T as well as I do, and I'm just like, that's totally an AT&T problem.
So, kind of interesting, guys. If we take a look at this, is it QuadRooter? Am I pronouncing that right, or is it
Yeah.
not as simple as it? Is it QuadRooter because it affects quad core devices? Is that the
Well,
logic there?
I thought it was QuadRooter because there was 4 vulnerabilities, but who knows?
That would make more sense. So obviously BlackBerry was quick to patch this one, right? And in the article that they did, they kind of talk about how there were there were areas of the firmware that were there that basically block out those permissions from being exploited, which is kind of interesting. And I don't know if that pays quote to the fact that this is a new exploit that's kind of just come about, just been revealed, and what to know in terms of the scare, but like this is ultimately a hardware problem, right? This is a Qualcomm issue before anything else. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yeah, it's basically at the core, it's a Qualcomm problem, not any one independent device manufacturer, because it basically sticks within the Qualcomm processors.
I think a point to make is that when these exploits come out, it doesn't mean that it's been used either, right? We don't necessarily know the impact that it's had on mobile devices, period. So to speak on it, from us is a little bit, needless at this point because we just don't know. There's so many aspects of it. The fact that we do know BlackBerry's pushed an update and gotten it out for DTEK50 and Priv for the unlocked devices and trickling down to carriers and such, I think that's a really important piece. If you go to like a website that checks whether you have the exploit, even after the you getting this patch, it's still going to show you have the exploit. And I don't know if that's just looking down at kind of what software on what stock you're using or what the case may be, But again, whether you're actually vulnerable or not is probably less of a conversation and more about again why Android continues to push out these updates, every 30 days to keep people in the loop as to what some of those exploits are and patch them. One of the most important pieces with security is just the time, right? How long was the exploit out? How long was it available, and how deep into my data did they get, right? That should be some of your questions. Were you guys impressed with BlackBerry's response here, kind of beating out a lot of the other OEMs? Do you think that's kind of part of why you buy a BlackBerry Android at this point?
Yeah, I mean, next to
Yeah.
Nexus devices, it's pretty, I mean, that's basically what they've been selling people on. So how could you not have taken the time to go ahead and get that stuff out there as soon as possible, right? That would be a little bit, I don't even know the exact word for it, but you know, they basically have to go ahead and make sure that everybody is kept up to date when it comes to the security aspect of it. Here's one thing that I find absolutely hilarious about the whole security situation, though, is that okay, BlackBerry sells you these devices with the security intent in mind, and that's great. They keep the updates coming. They fall in line with Nexus devices. They keep the security updates and everything else like that. But at the same time, when these exploits are essentially found, most people lose their heads over them. You know, the sky is falling, whatever. Everybody goes all chicken little about it, about how their devices have exploits and this and that. And most of the time, the exploits, as you mentioned, James, were never actually in use to begin with. There's like proof of concept that this exploit is existent, but there is no proof that it has ever actually been put to use, or in a lot of cases, the person who is looking to go ahead and make use of the vulnerability actually needs to have your device. Nobody pays attention to the finer details, um, especially in the fact of QuadRooter, where basically Google on their end fixed it within the Google Play Store. So it essentially made 99% of the devices no longer vulnerable to it, at least through installing applications or anything like that, because they already had it covered. So it wasn't even necessarily applicable to 99% of the people, but everybody out there loses their minds over all of these different exploits and vulnerabilities that come up. And I just find that absolutely hilarious because on one hand, I mean, yeah, it's BlackBerry's selling point. It's one of the key highlights that we tell people, okay, BlackBerry's got your butt covered, you know, when it comes to security updates and everything like that, and they're on par with Nexus updates. But at the same time, when those exploits come out, you know, it's kind of like, well, they kind of don't matter anyways because they weren't ever actually in use. So, you know, it kind of makes you sound kind of hypocritical to be able to go ahead and say, you need to buy this device to be secure, but don't worry about it because 99% of the stuff is already secure at the same time. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of a weird place to be in, to be able to go ahead and highlight these things and suggest these devices to people. And I don't know, I just find that really, really strange.
Yeah, it definitely is. And BlackBerry was pretty vocal about we're the first to patch this kind of, and that in and of itself is great. Like as Blaze mentioned, like it was probably not even a big deal anyway. When Checkpoint found this back in April, they let people know, right? So obviously Google and these others have known about this exploit for a while and have been working obviously to patch it and see what they can do to fix it. BlackBerry has some software on the back end called BlackBerry BID, integrity detection, and that background process is always running to keep an eye on the security and the privacy of your device via DTEK. And obviously, app developers can start building into that and basically building into DTEK. And if you think about that concept of like almost a DTEK that you can plug into, you can validate many, many layers of the applications, especially on the enterprise side where you aren't running as many applications, and make sure that your device is 100% secure. These back-end system processes are definitely there to help mitigate some of the risks that you're going to encounter by exploits such as QuadRooter, which again just shows BlackBerry's got so many layers within this Android device and even BB10 that it is going to be pretty hard for real exploits to personally affect these people who ultimately are running devices that are affected. And I think both Priv and DTEK50 were affected just based off the Qualcomm chip there. Alex, in terms of a Nexus, right, this stuff is obviously going to get solved in their monthly security updates. Do you feel that there's a lot of value that comes with these updates? I mean, is that something that would keep you on BlackBerry? Like, for instance, if we phrase the situation in a way where Nexus didn't provide monthly updates and BlackBerry was really the only OEM going out of their way to do so, do you think that there would be more value added to the fact that BlackBerry is so on top of these, this aggressive patching, or does it have more value for you, otherwise in terms of just getting the software that Android comes with the latest?
Well, it's a mixture. I think it's actually kind of funny that Nexus seems big to us. People who know what's going on with Android, they know about Nexus, but normally Nexus is not sold in carrier stores. So I almost think that BlackBerry might be more well known in the Android space than even Nexus is. These upcoming Nexus devices, though, I think Google is actually going to be promoting them and pushing them, so that won't be the case much longer. But I do think that the average consumer, if they were like, I need a phone and I only care about security, BlackBerry's recommendation way over Nexus, because a carrier store can't even sell Nexus, or they aren't right now. But a lot of this is probably going to change with this next device anyway. I do think that is the main thing that BlackBerry has to focus on. I don't necessarily know if I personally am worried that much about security. It's great to have these patches and things like that. I just want to get the patches in general. I don't necessarily need to get it the day that the patch comes out, because I think about it logically. What are the chances I'm going to end up getting that vulnerability and actually get taking advantage of it in some way? And it's just so slim anyway, and I'm not doing anything crazy enough that would just make me be a target. So I think it makes sense for certain people, and probably much more than getting an LG something or whatever, because many of these manufacturers are kind of saying they're not going to be doing updates, or they will be every 3 months, and I think that's not enough.
Hello, Moto.
Yeah.
They were just flat out like, nope, not happening. We got snappy backs that we got to start building, guys. No way we're getting a security
Yeah.
update out. It's one of those things that it's like, if BlackBerry really, really wants to push this story of secure Android, where does the line draw between the profitability of that endeavor and then the viability of the brand that you're working with? You know, it's like, is there really a runway for BlackBerry to have a space on the Android camp, or is it more maybe important for them to take kind of the core underpinnings, the skeletal kind of connection points
Yeah.
that they have of their version of Android, and then license that out to someone else? You know, make
Yeah.
your Android more secure and just pay us a royalty on your distribution. You know, as opposed to trying to make people buy their own distribution or creating their own distribution. Maybe just
Yes.
offer that to others. Like,
Can I
get
They
on with
need
it.
they need to convince people that security is important in the first place to begin with, and that begins a lot of that begins within the Android world. And I think that there's a lot of focus within, like, it sort of goes back to the conversation I was having about everybody goes all Chicken Little and the sky is falling, you know, within the tech world, and you know, we all read the scary headlines. So there are people out there that are obviously aware of the vulnerabilities that continue to happen within the Android ecosystem, but I think they need to sell people on the fact that they can go ahead and basically take care of some of these vulnerabilities ahead of time. Like, they haven't won anybody's trust yet, you know, and fixing, to me, when I look at the QuadRooter situation, that was nothing more to me than basically a step forward in proving that they can go ahead and fix these vulnerabilities and prove to the Android audience that they can go ahead and cover these things faster than anybody else.
Like,
I
I
mean,
wish Google would just hire BlackBerry to
That's
do it.
yes.
You know, like,
Yeah.
For like a manufacturer should be able to hire BlackBerry and they can like maintain and do that for them. Like that could be a whole like software as service kind of offering that they can just do for everyone.
we've got we've got DTEK loaded, and it brings the whole stack of BlackBerry security to other OEMs. Boom, license.
Yeah.
Right.
right,
And
but to get there, they need to prove that that stuff actually works and that they can do it, right?
Well, so I want to bring this up because this kind of ties a lot of things in, and
what does that mean for Android N? You know, and stuff to come.
yeah,
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on that maybe we don't necessarily know about. Chen was
Right.
pretty loose-lipped when it came to Android N, and basically saying that BlackBerry has a special project, but then he stopped. He immediately stopped, and then so it makes you wonder what that special project is and what may be going on with Android N. Is it something that is just BlackBerry focused, or is it something, you know, that is more Android focused, and it could be that next evolutionary step to actually working with Google or whatever, right? We don't know, but I mean, as far as I know, that they have something special coming with Android N. So
And this is something that is definitely going to be highlighted in our after show, gentlemen. I picked an article. It's a really interesting one that I saw earlier over on Google News, and it was talking about. It's from Tech Radar, and the headline reads, "We challenge Samsung and BlackBerry over their security Android, their Android security claims." And both made statements to Tech Radar about, what the security offerings are. And it's just a really interesting conversation that we will talk about more in the after show piece that we do. You guys want to clear anything else out? I mean, it's been such a droll week. I'm kind of getting bored, man. I need some BlackBerry action. Like, now that DTEK50 is here, I'm just like so into this review. And
that's going to be the name of the next device, James. They're scrapping DTEK. They're going to call it the BlackBerry Action.
Right. Like, I need some for sure.
I kind of want to end with like a kind of question to you guys while also tying in a discussion I had with somebody. And James, I think I brought this up kind of in the BerryFlow chat a little bit. I kind of got in this debate with my buddy who really likes Apple, and he kept bringing up these comparisons where it was showing like this percentage of the market is using Apple, this percentage is using Android, and then like this small tiny 0% is using BlackBerry. And he's like, so like what's BlackBerry doing anyway? Like they don't even exist, like whatever. And I was like, well, they're a software company now. Like, that's why they don't care about the hardware really much anymore. And he's like, well, what software are they producing? And like, this just opened up the box of worms because like I love that we do Upstream. It's like I know everything about BlackBerry. I was like, dude, they do asset tracking, mobile device management. They're like 60 million cars, and like CarPlay. Like you love Apple, right? Like they're buying from QNX, which is BlackBerry. They're just going through this whole thing, and then he kind of responds to me, and he was like, honestly, like I didn't know that BlackBerry tech was across so many platforms. Like genuinely, he's like, it's really just been more out of sight, out of mind mentality. So that was like really eye opening to me, where I realized like it actually seems like it's hurting BlackBerry's brand. The fact that they're even showing up in these charts, like screw the fact that they're showing up in these charts that like BlackBerry owns 0.001% of the market. Like that's making them look worse than they are because they're now a software company, yet they're still being looked at as a hardware company, and that's another way for them to be looked negatively toward. So
They're
like,
gonna. That's basically like why they were so aggressive the past few months to basically say like we're a software company, although that aggressiveness sort of came at the time when they were releasing a new device, which is hardware.
yeah,
But
but
at
do
the
they
same
need to
time,
fully get out of hardware? Like, is it like as much as we don't want them to, and as much as we've had these conversations in the past, like my eyes are kind of open now, and I almost feel like they should get out of or hardware like entirely because it's
So,
almost like negative.
Alex, and here's the weirdest point about this DTEK50 device. Okay, it's that for the first time in my history with BlackBerry, right? It finally feels like they are out of the hardware business. Like the DTEK50 feels like something that it isn't. Like it
yeah,
finally feels like this is not a BlackBerry in any way,
Okay,
shape, or form. But I'm okay with it.
okay,
And it really, honestly, if you look at this is clearly a TCL reference design. TCL builds nice devices. What's Pat TCL on the back for coming to the game strong with this device, right? But all BlackBerry did was put a different backplate and logo on it.
and load
That's
their software, which
yeah,
is the key point. They
and that
loaded
is.
their
Mhm.
software.
And again, as Alex mentioned, software story, right? How do you sell people on not being a hardware player when you still make hardware, right? It's again that perception conversation we were having earlier where you really need to be more clear as to who and what you are in this market because you can service people without necessarily having to be their go-to, handset or whatever the case may be.
Well, here's another thing. Here's another, I guess, open-ended question. Do you think any of the next devices like that come out from BlackBerry are going to be similar to the DTEK50 in that they just basically take a reference design and leave it at that, or do you think that it's actually going to be a BlackBerry design device
So
that you put
we we
out?
talked we talked about this on our last after show, and for those who don't have access, we'll loop you in here to some of that conversation. But we basically were talking about how that device, the Mercury that we saw, looked like an iPhone reference design.
Yeah,
So to answer that question, right? I think Priv is kind of that pinnacle of what we're going to see BlackBerry innovate around in terms of how far they're willing to go to homogenize themselves, right? Where that was clearly, a Samsung with the heart of an LG, right? In the vaguest of terms. However, if that's still being said, it's still kind of uniquely BlackBerry. It clearly has that BlackBerry touch on it, and I feel like subsequent devices, we're going to see more of a breakout between obviously what we're seeing on the right-hand side, which is these kind of all-touch devices, and then these very, very, very typical BlackBerry type devices. Here's a random thought I had the other day, guys, and I wanted to see what you guys thought about it. If BlackBerry goes to TCL in China for their mid-range, right, goes to OnePlus in China, right, for the Argon, and then all the QWERTY devices are BlackBerry quote-unquote built, where they really are putting their design efforts into building the next best QWERTY device. And these all-touch phones are just great all-touch phones, that you don't have to go out of your way to really, really, make a lot of key differentiators on that hardware, story. Going to other players in the market and doing a reference design, it could be something that, at least for all-touch devices, just makes more financial sense.
yeah, I could
Especially
definitely
if
see it for all touch devices.
and if they did a OnePlus, the market would go crazy, right? Even if they went to like a ZTE or something like that, and just worked on a partnership there and built another device. I think it's good, but at the same time, the conversation around what this device is compared to what, what BlackBerry was in the past, that line still definitely needs to be drawn. What about you, Alex? Could you see BlackBerry, going to OnePlus and getting them to build maybe not, a total replica, but maybe an older model design with a slightly updated specs or something like that, where they're taking some of the pieces they've worked with and ultimately applying those toward a BlackBerry reference. Do you see maybe something like that could happen with a device like an Oregon, or do you kind of see them going more toward the Priv where, it has the logo on the front? It's clearly not just a reference. It's something they engineered.
I mean, I feel like that's probably the route going forward, to find some type of partner, just like they did Alcatel. But if they do produce a phone themselves, then it needs to just have a physical QWERTY keyboard. If it doesn't, I don't understand why. And maybe even have like OnePlus or some company like that, like them build the physical keyboard, and they are the ones that like oversee it and things like that. But maybe let them use some of the patents, or like I don't really know. I just think more and more BlackBerry kind of needs to get out of the hardware business from them personally doing it, because hardware isn't the future anyway. Like even Apple, like they're selling less and less hardware each year, and they're seeing like, shoot, we need to focus more on software. We need this recurring revenue. We need hardware. People are buying phones less and less. You could buy a phone and keep it for 4 years now, and the new phones coming 4 years later really aren't that much more powerful. It's hardware is just not the way of the future anymore. So I think BlackBerry's
say that at some point. Yeah, I'm sure he said the exact same thing.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but back then I think
still.
too, I didn't want to believe it. Like I love BlackBerry hardware. I didn't want them to get out of it. But like now we're slowly seeing it, that I'm finally accepting it for numerous reasons. I think it just does make sense. But
the other side of that is that I don't understand why so many people see it as such a bad thing either. Right? Why, if BlackBerry did manage to go ahead and successfully exit the hardware, and the software side of the business was doing absolutely as well as it possibly could, then what's the problem? Like, I don't understand. Like, if you look on the internet, you look at all of the articles discussing BlackBerry exiting hardware, the majority of them, at least in the comment sections, are basically like, why did you write this? This is terrible. No, BlackBerry should stay in hardware. No, no, no. But why? Why? If it's not being profitable, why? Why would you stay in a business that's not being profitable? It'd be like if me owning a convenience store in the middle of nowhere that gets one customer per year. Like, why would I do that? You're
here's the rub, Blaze, right? It's like, how do you let go of doing something that you're good at?
Right.
It's like I don't need this, but I want it, and that's John Chen's fight right now. It's like,
but when it costs billions of dollars, I'm glad to let it go.
It's just like right now, right? BlackBerry is weaning themselves out of the hardware game, but at the same time building better and better phones than they ever have, or offering to customers better and better phones than they ever have. And it's like at some point, either something's got to give or you got to get out, And I think by the end of this year, we're going to know which way it's gone. I'm happy to say at least that I have the last BlackBerry 10 device there that is built, and I'm waiting for 10.3.3 in this NIAP certification, and I'm just going to blame the government for the delay at this point because BlackBerry's got enough slack as is, right?
It's probably bad that I'm like, I go out of my way to not use my Silver Edition passport because I know that chances are it's probably the last device, and I don't want to damage it in any sort of way or anything.
Right. I almost want to get it damaged and bruised and broken to a degree just to say that it lived, that it actually was used for something. I don't know, man. I do like this DTEK50. Even the battery for me, like, even with my heavy gaming and stuff like that, has been just kind of rock solid. And the fact that it came with that massive battery, only makes it even more of a buy-in, especially because the thing can be used for anything, really. I could take my tablet out and go do that or whatever the case. I don't know, Alex. I think you should really start steering some of your clientele, and by clientele I mean your family and friends, toward a DTEK50 device.
I have some pushover actual like businesses, but a lot of them are going just the iPhone route, and it is sick to my stomach because it makes me like, whatever.
Man, like 7 iPhones.
It's not like, though, you know,
14 of DTEK50s for the amount of the iPhones that you buy.
So here's actually something interesting. One of my clients, they were buying every single new employee like an iPhone 6 off contract. It was like $700 or whatever, and they're putting on their own individual plan. And one of the things that I do is I help them set up bring your own device. And it's like, you know, your employee really doesn't want to carry 2 phones with them. Normally the employee has an iPhone 6 and now they're carrying another iPhone 6 with them, and one's work, one's personal. So I go in there and I set up software to make it so they can run everything work related just on their personal phone, so they only need one device. And it's also like, and now you don't have to spend $800 for every new employee plus, you know, a Verizon plan plus this, that. So I'm trying to actually get them away from even buying devices and just pushing BYOD. So I'm not even like trying to push the device sales. I think BlackBerry is more in like corporate, like we have 10,000 employees and maybe 500 of them or 5,000 of them want a physical device, and then here's where we'll mass buy them.
I am really, really interested to see kind of where the next couple months are going to take BlackBerry, because it has been a quiet summer, guys, and I think things are going to change here very quickly as we head into this fall season and obviously into winter as well. Some things BlackBerry needs to do right now is growth. They've kind of laid down a new layer of sod. They've laid down new seed. They've been watering, right? It's now, can they grow new? And things like radar are definitely going to be coming to a head here. We're starting to see like more media materials running around for the program. It looks like it's hitting some kind of, I guess, actual release past these two proof of concepts that they did for it. And I'm hoping we start seeing even more just BlackBerry IoT stuff in general, like things like the HBox and things like that. I'd love to see. And maybe again, when we look at BlackBerry's hardware business and we look at things like radar and we look at things like the DTEK50, it's like they've already left the hardware. But at the end of the day, they've even done more than that. It's like they've evolved the hardware business to be more mature to the market in which it lives in, you know? The market that they were in wasn't going to buy a Priv for $700, right? But is more inclined to buy a $299 DTEK50 that has similar performance, right? And of course, you know, reusing and getting different hardware partners to build you things like radar and getting partnered with a reference for TCL and things like that shows that BlackBerry is a lot more fluid in how they're actually going to be coming to market. And I'm excited to see what else they're going to bring, because right now they're seeing the wider evolution of their hardware strategy play in deeper to the roots of what their core software offering is, and that's like QNX and, you know, obviously the NOC infrastructure and all of that. When you tie in the MDM stuff that they have in the middle, I mean, they could do a lot.
10.3.3 coming?
August isn't over yet, right? They haven't lied yet. They still got some runway. I'm thinking they got it, and they're just trying to like get with the carriers right now and figure out how it's gonna go. Like, again, it's almost like if you haven't kept the vein going, it's gonna be hard to pump blood through it, you know? Especially with some of these carrier partners. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that we got tweeted at earlier, Blaze. It's that Rogers in Canada has a really, really aggressive deal on Priv right now for enterprise users. If you go to enterprise.rogers.com and you're looking for like an enterprise device for your business, you can get a Priv for $0 down, which is a really good deal. That's compared to like the $0 down you're going to get like on an iPhone SE, and like just the devices in terms of like productivity, security, all of that is pretty monumental. So really some good stuff going over there. The carrier sales teams that are working in Canada continue to grind out and just try to get that job done. So I'm glad that they're staying, you know, aggressive in those key markets, and I think that focus is super important to them continuing to grow. I'm interested to see like what's going to happen with this BBM Discover tab. Like, give me something I want to go there for, and maybe like I'll get it. But right now, it's just not happening, man.
Right now, it's 3 little icons that are kind of like a waste of screen display space.
Yeah.
I just like the UI better with the shop icon there. I don't know why. Maybe because in mobile applications we're used to the shopping cart kind of, you know, being there. I like that personally, but I digress. Let's hop on this after show, gentlemen. Let's talk about BlackBerry and Samsung and some other player in the Android space take on security. And we'll talk a little bit about how the gambit for security, especially on Android, just continues to rise. If you guys want to check out our BerryFlow Upstream after show, just go to berryflow.com/Patreon. It's a really cool page. We've got a bunch of stuff over there. It really allows support for our site, this podcast. We pay Alex to do some things. Like he just had a heart attack the other night when some security stuff went awry on BerryFlow, and he spent many hours getting that up and getting it back up in action. So we appreciate that, Alex.
Of course, definitely. That's what I do.
Alex is like,
Holy crap.
BerryFlow is too fat.
It
The
is.
Note 7 is like still $600 on Rogers Enterprise. I actually have an Enterprise account, so
Really?
Right.
yeah, but it's still $700. Jeez.
Right. And then like you get a Priv, and it's like you get the curved screen, like you get
Right.
almost the same form factor in terms of screen size. Like, well, you need a pen? Do your people really need a pen? Like, I mean, and an iris scanner? Like, I'm done. But we'll talk more about that in our after show. Definitely go check that out. We'll catch you guys next week.
Yep. Later, guys.
Peace out.